Okay, I want to address a few things about creating branches, twigs, trees. I have a couple of brushes here. In this case, I've got the Princeton Neptune number 10. That's a 10 round. And in this case, I have the 2-aught, that's 2 zeros, Rosemary and Company Ivory Round. And this is a very fine detail brush, which I'll use on the ends of some of these branches. But first, what I want to do is I'm just going to start at the base. If you start up here and pull down, the majority of your pigment is going to release up here as opposed to down here where the branch is wider. And so in this case, I'm going to press and pull and just follow this shape. And as I move up, I'm going to release. This is my first pass, and then I go back, press a little harder for some width while this is wet, and then very gradually begin to release. So the widest space is down here, and the branch gets progressively thinner as it moves up and away from its base. I will do the same thing over here. Press, which will widen the brush, begin to release, follow that shape, and completely release. Over here, I'm going to press lightly and release. I will come back down here and reconnect if I have not actually connected these two elements. And I can go back in here with a second pass. It can be sort of a lost and found. I'm tapping a little bit just so that these two elements of pigment marry together so I don't have a hard start here. Then down in here one more time, we will press harder, lift, and end. We don't want all of our branches moving off in one direction, so I'm going to come over here, press sort of a medium, all right, there we go. And then I'll come over here and do the same thing, only in this direction. If the mark thins out here, I will come back in and thicken that up so that I have a branch that makes sense. We want thicker branch here, moving gradually to thin. I get carried away trying to describe this. Okay, what I will do now is switch to the fine brush, dip back into the pigment, and begin to create some marks off of the widths that I see here. What I'm doing here is adding a little bit of shadow to the underside of this branch. And I'm keeping the brush moving a little bit back and forth so it's not too rigid. The more vertical I hold this brush, the finer the point I'm going to make. I was just looking at the camera to see if I'm placing this in a manner that you can actually see it. Notice that at these ends, when I come up here, frequently I let this be a lost and found line. When I looked back at this section, I'm noticing that this branch right here, this twig, is not attached to the main branch. So I just come back in here and I'm just making a little bit of a correction. So this is line work, detail work with this fine brush, and you can put as many of these little marks on as you feel are necessary. Depending on the growth habit of a tree, you want to take a look at, first of all, what the tree is, how does it grow, I'm laughing. All of a sudden I'm seeing these bits of masking fluid, and I actually began to draw with paint and didn't follow my original masking fluid lines at all. So this picture looks quite different, and these will be meaningless. So it'll be interesting when I take those off. That's kind of funny. But at any rate, we'll take a look at that in a little bit. Okay, so that's enough of this. I'm just going to drop in the pigment, very gray for this little fish. It's dry enough down here for me to do this. It's just quickly just throwing in some pigment in. It's just a mass in the shape of this little fish, and that's good enough. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll just take a little bit of that deeper green and take a look at some of these marks down here, and got a little carried away with my scratching, and so let's just do this. So make nice sweeping marks. I'm going very light so that I don't end up with a mark that I don't want. And if I make nice sweeping marks, I'm more likely to end up with what I want rather than being too rigid with that. So at this point, this little fish is probably not dark enough. He looks a little transparent, so while this is still wet, I'm just going to drop in a little bit more pigment so that he doesn't look transparent. Edit his shape a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to let this section dry up in here before I take the masking fluid off, and we'll take it to the next step.